Just letting you know that we will keep letting people in because a few people will come in late, but we will get started so that we've only got Gina for a little less than an hour, so we want to make the most of it. So welcome everybody. I'm Josie Pagani, the Director of Council for International Development, and we're really thrilled to have Gina Houng Lee come back and talk to us about gender frameworks and approaches. And as many of you will know, you were involved in the gender workshops we did late last year. They were fantastically popular, and there was a big demand to bring Gina back to just have a look at a kind of revision of some of the approaches and frameworks that are there. So just to remind you of Gina's background and the approach that we've taken here is, so Gina's based in Fiji. Her work has been Pacific based for her whole career, and worked with, for example, DFAT on a project about Pacific women shaping Pacific development programs. So really comes with decades of experience of supporting Pacific women to participate more fully in political, economic, social contexts. And that's really what today is about. We were just talking about how, you know, it's not rocket science. We're trying to increase participation, and working out how best to do that and how to approach that is what this is all about. And obviously we keep revisiting this all the time so that we keep our own skills and approaches up to date. So we have roughly about 60 people in total, a few people clustered around one device. We've got people from across the Pacific, Timor-Leste, Tonga, Cook Islands, obviously Fiji, and even some guests from the Netherlands and of course Australia, and our own colleagues here in New Zealand, the INGO sector, but also business, some colleagues from MFAT, and also some consultants and individuals. So a really great cross-section of people. So Gina, kia ora and welcome to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and thank you for coming back to talk to us.
Great. Thank you very much, Josie, for that warm word of welcome, and Bula Vinaka to you from Fiji. And thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion on looking at gender and social inclusion analysis and also frameworks. And yeah, thank you. I've seen the list of participants, and so I feel very privileged and honored to share with you some of the frameworks or the analysis and the tools in which to undertake gender analysis. I, just wanted to say that I'm also open to drawing from your experience and also the work that you are doing, and to use this as a basis to just have a conversation about using some of the frameworks, but also practice and challenges in undertaking development work, or the work that you currently do, and the various areas or particular changes or work that you're involved in terms of development. So I'll just start. This presentation is sort of comes from also some of my time when I was working at DFAT as assisting with the in fact, it was preparation for the World Conference on Women in Beijing. And then now I just saw the powerful opening of the Commission on the Status of Women. And it's all, being done virtually. And it, reminds me of how much work that we have to continue in addressing the inequalities. And I feel inspired by hearing all those respective voices, assessing or determining the progress and the status of women, and then at the same time pushing for the advancement of gender equality. So okay, I've started essentially what I'm going to be covering is just the frameworks, but looking a little bit as an introduction on gender mainstreaming and looking at gender and social inclusion analysis. I've titled it Plenty of Common Sense, but this is like a little bit of the extra 10% because, you know, it's about being involved, consulting, participation, and, you know, finding out what's happening with any group or situation, and then just a little bit of these frameworks just to tweak you, to assist you, or to draw from these respective frameworks. Okay, so what I hope to do today is just a little bit of demystify gender inclusion analysis, what it is, when it's needed, who does it, a little bit of hands-on practice of doing some of the gender analysis, and then using some of the frameworks of, you know, just doing it, but also recognizing some of our own limitations and when we might draw in expertise, or who can we go to for help, or who we can then ask. And then just this little overview of frameworks that can help you with your analysis. So I'm happy for you if you know, want to, if there's something that you want me to stop at, and no problem, we can, you know, have this as a little bit more interactive, or you can use the chat box, and I think Luke can alert me to if there's any questions. Okay, so what is a gender analysis? Just very quickly, why do development groups, why do we need gender analysis? When should we do it? And who is qualified to use and to undertake gender analysis? Okay, so let's start with the first one. What is gender analysis and when should we do it? So anyone wants to kind of start and just sort of what is gender analysis to them? Anyone wants to kind of give me a response?
Oh, hi, Gina. This is Quinelda from Child Fund. I'll have a go at this question. So what is it? I think it's really trying to understand the nature of gender and femininity, masculinity, and all those identities under the LGBTQI umbrella, and understanding how we can meaningfully draw them into any work that we're doing, and not in a tokenistic or sort of in a truly integrated way. And when should we do it? I think we should be doing it all the time, and in formal and more informal ways.
Yep. Thank you for your response. Exactly. I remember with in fact, it's still to this day when we kind of highlight, okay, we're doing a gender analysis, immediately some of the participants, especially with doing government gender mainstreaming, they just immediately see, oh, we've got women, you know, here that we've got women at, you know, our CEO is a woman, and kind of it just stops there. But we're trying to work furthermore in terms of you know, an integrated and also program and policy way. So that's exactly right. It's understanding, of course, the sex-specific differences, and also bringing in gendered powered relations, and trying to understand, you know, gender discrimination. If there's any group or a community that feels disadvantaged, or how do they experience that disadvantage? It's an analysis of covering exactly relationships between men and women, boys and girls, even across the spectrum of LGBTQI, sexual and gender minorities, and trying to look at understanding that social analysis. So yes, exactly. When should we do it? It's clearly before the intervention, any assessment, before anything, we have to know who does what, who owns what. If we make this intervention, who will stand to lose, who might gain from this? who is deciding, who is making decisions in this community, why inequality, why are there some certain groups excluded, what are the root causes, what can we do about it? So, yep. And when we're doing during the intervention, are there any changes that's happening in the domains that we expected being undertaken if it's during the intervention? And of course, after the intervention, in terms of a program or project cycle, whether we're doing it in evaluation or impact assessment, what has changed? To what extent has it changed, and for whom, and why, and how? All those kind of very, very common sense questions that we would ask in terms of what it is and when should we do it. Okay, why do we need it? Sorry, I'll just go back. Why is it that we would want to do it? I mean, why should we do this kind of gender and social analysis? Anyone wants to respond?
Sorry, Gina, this is Sally from Child Fund. I just wanted to add one more in there, and I guess it's just always keeping an eye on who's not there, and just having that understanding that when we're doing these analyses, we should always be thinking who isn't there and why not. Just a small inclusion there.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great, Sally. It's trying to see who is invisible. I mean, why is it that, you know, we're somewhere and then who's missing? Why they're not there? Where are the people who are invisible? Who are the groups that are invisible? Yep. Thank you, Sally. Thanks for that. Okay, so just reflecting on why is it that we do gender analysis, and why is it that we do social analysis, or any analysis of this? Why is it that we do it?
Hi, Gina. It's Darren here from Oxfam. I guess why we do it is because different groups, different people from different gender identities and sexual identities are affected by situations differently, and are situated in the situation differently. So just understanding those differences helps you to know how to calibrate your work appropriately to support all people in all their different ways of being.
Yep. Thanks, Darren. Thank you for that. Exactly. So I think the main thing is that we're reaching the people that matter, and gender analysis is a recognition, really, that not all women and men's lives are the same. Our life experiences, our different needs and priorities vary according to our different groups, our different social identities, age, ethnicity, disability, our income levels, our employment status, marital status, our sexual orientation, and that different strategies, if we are trying to reach the same equitable outcomes for women and men, and for different groups of women and men, that we've got to do this gender and social inclusion analysis. And in a way, you know, gender analysis is trying to tries to collect and identify and examine these different roles of women and men. Sorry, I've just lost my how to. Okay, here it is. Thank you. All right. So yes, it's essentially reaching the people that matter. You know, that we can. We're trying to reach the people that matter, and we have to recognize men and women, boys and girls, their different roles, responsibilities, and we are trying to program effectively. This is one of my favorite slides in terms of, you know, in terms of kind of understanding those differences. You know, like our goal of gender equality, trying to move to ensuring that we reach gender equality, and of course in the first image, you know, because like sometimes we're currently at the moment there's a few with the drive the existing legislation that we're trying to pass, that they're trying to pass in Fiji, people say, oh no, the legislation is gender neutral. It's gender neutral, you know, but in fact, we end up being a little bit blind, and we're not applying sort of the sensitivity to how that particular law or that particular policy affects people differently. So, you know, in the first one, it's saying that everyone will benefit from the same support. They're all treated equally. But of course, if, you know, it is the same approach, if you're doing that approach, everyone is receiving the sort of this exact same equal approach. But you can see that the person who's vertically challenged is not able to see the game, is not able to reach those outcomes. So that person is disadvantaged. So in the second image, of course, we are giving different support, trying to sort of, in a way, we might be tinkering our program so that we are applying and giving to you know, additional resources. So the person on the far right is, of course, receiving 2 boxes, but so that they can have equal access to being able to watch the game. So they're, you know, being treated equitably. But of course, in the third image is what we're trying to address. All 3 can see the game because we're making allowances and accommodations, because we're trying to remove that actual structural barrier. The sort of systemic barrier has been removed because we're trying to make sure that everyone can be accommodated. So in a way, in our framing, we needing to understand why is it that particular group, why is it that we might then be applying affirmative action, or we might be able to be given additional resources. It's in a sort of more substantive way so that everyone can enjoy and be part of development. And being involved in receiving all the benefits or all these outcomes. Okay, who is qualified to do gender analysis? And you've already mentioned all of us are. And you know, if we're involved in any of our development work, we need to do this gender analysis at many points in your working life. And we need to ask questions about who's winning or who's, you know, who's losing in this development approach. And then we have to bring in and consider the social group's experience. They might differ from another group's outcomes. So it might be applying our theoretical framework in our analysis. I'm not sure, there's a range of participants here in terms of when you might have undertaken gender analysis. So anyone wants to share in what way they have applied or used done gender analysis in their work? Anyone wants to share their experience?
Hi Gina, it's Quinelda from Child Fund again. So actually for our negotiated partnership program with MFAT, we performed a gender analysis for all of our projects within the program. And that was a really interesting experience, looking at the experiences of women and men and boys and girls. For many of the places we work, you know, LGBTQI identification is sensitive, particularly in Kiribati, where homosexuality remains illegal. And so through that process, we were able to get a good picture and a good understanding at the baseline of our projects, what gender looks like on the ground for the communities we support.
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks, Quinella. So essentially that's you know, doing a gender audit or looking at your programs and doing that analysis and finding out who's in that community. I mean, there's different participants here. Some of you may be evaluating, you may be commissioning, or you may be consuming gender analysis, or you may be critically assessing something. And So it's bringing in or drawing in from your gender analysis. Okay, so I'm just going to now do a little bit of it's just a little bit of a practice. You know, it's of course asking very good questions. So we already have sent you 2 case studies. So it's just a quick exercise to get you involved in doing a gender analysis. So this is just to you would have received the case studies. So it's up to you which one you want to pick. So pick either the water and sanitation or the tertiary education one. And just for 10 minutes, you just write down, read the case study, and then just list down any questions that you may have in terms of doing, you know, what questions that you have. If you can put it on a post-it note, that'd be great. But if not, just write down as many questions on a separate piece of paper if you can. I'll just allow you just only 10 minutes just to, well, just quickly just read the assessment and do those questions.
Hi everyone, if you can't find them, I emailed them through just before the session started, so they should be just in that same thread with the Zoom link this morning. If you can't access them, let me know and I can put them in the group chat hopefully as well.
Okay. I think if you got enough questions. Yeah. All right. Okay. Essentially, it's just reading the case study. You've generated the questions. So now I'm going to just go a little bit over the frameworks, and then you will come back to looking at your questions that you've generated. So moving now on to gender frameworks. Is this a minefield or is it a treasure trove? So there's lots of frameworks. We'll be taking a closer look at some of them specifically, but oh, I'm supposed to enter. Oh, right, okay. Okay, so these are just some of the respective frameworks you might have heard from or seen in terms of some of the gender frameworks. And of course, frameworks start as a volume of field research and they become theories and then they distill down into kind of practical tools used for planning or programming or evaluating interventions. So yeah, so in a way they are not that much different from one another, but they have evolved over the 25 years to become more nuanced and rather than being specific on quantitative measures, they kind of have a nuance on drawing out things that might have been missing from one framework or addressing some of the weaknesses of some of the frameworks. So essentially, we've seen a move from women in development in the 1970s, calling for, it's just as like women's issues in development work, to a more looking at power and looking at gender relations, rather than looking at women's issues in isolation. It's rather looking at the, understanding of gender into the whole analysis. And frameworks, of course, offer kind of a little bit of a step-by-step process on conducting gender analysis. And it's kind of bringing and draws out like some of the different assumptions or values that people might have. So the Harvard one is just a little bit of, we'll be going further into the Rowan and Kelleher one in a little bit more detail. But first, just to give you a little bit of an overview, this is the Harvard framework. So the Harvard framework was one of the earlier gender analysis framework and was really looking at a lot of gender roles and trying to help us understand the difference between men and women and how they participate in the economy. It was kind of arguing for an economic case for investing in women as investing in men. It was kind of provided the economic rationality and argument. It started, I think, around about 1980, and I think it was the World Bank who approached Harvard University to develop some training for women in development. And it was developed in, around about 1984. And it's really looking at a development at the household and the individual household level, so sort of focusing on the data collection at the household level. It was useful in that it made women more visible. It drew on the disaggregated data, asking key questions and also checklists. It really is, a lot of it is quite project focused. It didn't look at policy and programs and was really quite I think it was highly used in the agriculture sector and also in the rural sector. It really looked a lot at women's productive roles, and the weaknesses was that it didn't look into kind of transformative, like it didn't like seek for change. It didn't ask questions about the existing inequalities. It was, this is what men and women are doing in these respective roles, and it didn't touch on decision making, or didn't look enough at power relations. And then it's also a little bit kind of top down, and assuming that women had all this time, it didn't kind of draw out respective power relations. So that's one of the frameworks. And then this is the Mossa triple roles framework. This was another popular framework and developed by Caroline Mossa. And she was working in the development planning unit at the University of London. Came out more as a working paper, and it followed the GAD approach in looking at gender roles and gender needs. So its starting point is that men and women are different and different needs, and that also women's triple role of reproductive role, productive, and managing community management type roles. And it also looked at women's practical gender needs, water, basic needs, but also looking at the strategic needs of voice, decision, participation in sort of the longer strategic gender needs as well. That, strategic gender needs are the needs that are required. More strategic needs are ones that try to look at why is it that women are subordinate in their respective positions in society, and then what are their legal rights, or why is the issue of domestic violence happening, or their equal wages, or why is it that women don't have control over their bodies. So trying to look and challenge as well the position of women, or the women's subordinate position. So this is a very valuable framework too, in that it brings out lots of visibility, brings out the range of the work that in these respective triple roles, what women are involved in. Very, very valuable for planners. It also addressed political questions in terms of the decision making and roles in terms of questioning women's subordinate position, and it is asking the question of the inequality. Why are there sort of why are women in why is it that there is inequality in some of these roles? The weaknesses was that maybe it didn't address also intersectionality, like how is it that you might be discriminated on the basis of your caste, your class, and race. It sort of looked a little bit at women a little bit in a homogeneous way. So that's this particular framework. So this other framework, Women's Empowerment Framework, this was a gender expert from Zambia. She is the author of this long way framework, and she's a very strong, active feminist. And she confronted a lot of discrimination issues affecting herself in Zambia. When she was a young secondary school teacher, government refused to grant her maternity leave. And of course, this violated government's obligation under the ILO convention. And she actually mobilized and formed a lobbying group that succeeded in forcing government to introduce maternity leave for teachers in 1974. In fact, when sharing some things with, some things that you kind of take for granted now, like in Fiji, you had to, my grandmother, no, would have been my mother. Yeah, when my mother's generation, she, if you worked in the civil service, as soon as you became pregnant, you would have to resign from the civil service. You couldn't work. So it reflects to me how, these changes have happening, but what people had to, what women had to go through, loss of job, loss of income, all of that, just because they got pregnant. And she also was someone who had another run-in during her career as a teacher. She insisted on wearing trousers to school, and they had to take this all the way up to the permanent secretary and the Ministry of Education. So Sarah Longway was a very strong feminist, and And she also even sued a Intercontinental Hotel when they refused her entry in the bar because she didn't have a male company, and she was stopped from going into the bar. So she sued the Intercontinental Hotel. But anyway, moving on to her and her framework. This was published in 1990, and it's really used to assess how development intervention might support greater women's empowerment. It's kind of got a specific, it's quite political in that. The key principle is that gender inequality is political. It is kind of, yeah, it's the personal is political in that women poverty is a result of the oppression and exploitation, not because they were not as productive or they weren't efficient. It's just, you know, clearly political in that the systemic ways in which women are exploited or oppressed. And this strong principle is an empowerment position. You have to focus on women's empowerment and address this systemic, you have to, you know, ensure that you address in women's empowerment. So she looked at 5 levels of addressing equality, like in terms of that earlier, earlier framework of looking at women's practical gender needs, strategic gender needs. She was on women's development as viewed in 5 levels of equality, kind of your welfare, your access, your constant, conscience raising, bringing out that consciousness, participation, being involved, and also level of control, things that you have to keep for in terms of control. So her approach was, welfare addresses our basic needs. Do we have access to credit? Do you have access to land? Do you have access to education? Conscientization is about that discrimination contributes to the gender-related problems, and women, women themselves also can contribute to this discrimination. So in a way, you must bring about your conscientization of that, because then that will allow you to understand how is it that you can become equal with men in terms of participating in decision making, and you can have better balance of power between the genders. So the challenge with her framework was that it just didn't kind of address the changes over time. And in the same way too, looking a little bit as to intersectionality and the various forms of inequality. Okay. All right, so many frameworks, that is being covered. So in a way, many frameworks, so there's kind of like common themes of that. It reminds us to look at resources, access, material and human. It looks at the public domain, the private domain. Do we have voice? Do these different groups of people have agency? Do they have control? What are the institutions? And going back to our earlier reasoning, or why is it that we do gender analysis? These frameworks just make it more visible. If there's groups, it's bringing out the invisibility making sure that we're more visible. And it's like a reminder on, how we have the different themes have different significant influence on each other. And also it can mean a different outcome for different people. What are the, characteristics of a good framework? Can we apply it in practice? Can we apply it in our work? Is it suitable to the local context? What does it matter in terms of the local context? And can we accommodate all these different social realities, status, age, occupation, caste, class? And these frameworks allows us to kind of kind of, in a way, offer us a way of capturing and recording this complexity, and try to help us with, simplifying some of the complex realities so that we can share it. So this is the extra 10% that this frameworks helps us with. Okay, so essentially, it's really about what is it that we want to change, and this is the framework that I wanted to this is the Rowan Kelleher framework. It was developed by Aruna Rao and David Kelleher in 2002, and in a way it looked at the 4 domains in which gender power structures operate. It's pretty straightforward. You can use it in a range of, whether you're wanting to use it on evidence mapping, stakeholder consultations, scoping, monitoring and evaluation. So the 2 top clusters are the individual changes in measurable individual change, the top 2 clusters. And, these involve like whether, freedom from violence, access to health, and knowledge, skills, political commitment to change or commitment to equality. And the bottom 2 are the systemic ones, like what is in our system. The one on the bottom right is the formal institutional rules that we have, whether it's our constitution, our laws and policies, and our, any of these norms and cultural practices. So if we have a change in one quadrant is related to change in another. So it's just showing that, these arrows which come in also show that, there's relationships between those 2 quadrants. Like, we might change the law, say, for example, but it might not necessarily have a change in practice. So we might change the law on employment. We might say that it doesn't necessarily mean that the law will be enforced, because it's also about informal change on practices. So if we make a change in, land inheritance in terms of administration, so that it might not necessarily mean that rural widows will instantly inherit, or in education, you get the sense of, what is it that sometimes you have a change in one quadrant requires a little bit more time in the other quadrant in terms of bringing awareness about, women's voice or men to be part of the process too. So some of that cultural and social norm practice and changing. Okay, here's the arrows. Am I doing the arrows? Yeah, okay. All right, so this is just a quick example of using the gender framework, that Kelleher and Rao framework, to program your monitoring and evaluation. In this case, it's just a way of looking at how is it that you might look at an analysis. So policies and laws in terms of addressing violence against women. You might have you use it as a monitoring evaluation, the number of girls and women who have increased their awareness of human rights on the awareness and agency side. Or on resources, you might look at the number of gender-based violence survivors receiving good services. And then you might look at the policies and laws. Are there adequate policies and laws at the community and the local level to ensure that there's prosecution on the formal side of the law? And then are we targeting awareness or social? Is there an decreased acceptance of violence against the marginalized groups? Is there increased support in target population for women's decision making and agency in terms of the social norms and practices? So that's a way of kind of using the framework for structuring your for monitoring and evaluation using the Rowan and Kelleher domains framework. So from your case study, you had your grid just looking at awareness and agency, resources, policies and laws, and social norms and practices. Looking at the questions that you have generated, are you able to put them into any of the quadrants? Can you see a clustering of your case study? So just try and see if there's any themes that you have in your particular case study.
Quinelda, have you got you need to put your mic on.
I think she's discussing.
Sorry.
Yes, yeah, we were just chatting and yeah, just working through our questions and pointing to the screen to where we'd fit them in.
Okay. All right.
Did you want to share? Did you want us to share?
Yep, if you've seen where have you got more of your questions around which cluster, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, great. So we think, because we looked at the tertiary activity,
Yeah.
and we really felt like we really focused on sort of what's happening and what is the experience of girls and boys in the home, and also for women, and is there a prevalence of early marriage or drugs and alcohol?
Hi, the number 3 here. And also just, I guess some of those broader social issues affecting especially girls, as in safety and access to secondary education, especially if they have to get accommodation. Menstruation, what happens around that age? There's a drop off at 12. Safety mapping in general. And then I guess looking at voice and agency, so how much they're included in the design process of infrastructure project, but also looking at the policies and the enablement of voice and participation of all genders in that process. Teachers, maybe the influence of the gender analysis on teachers themselves, as well as some of the broader, where are we on the grid here? Resource services and power awareness. So we also looked at environment, just in terms of distance to travel, natural hazards, that kind of thing. And just in terms of policy, looking at what the mandatory situation for education is and how that's governed. Just general access. So I think we had different parts of the grid, but probably more of an emphasis around the social norms practices.
Right. Yep.
Part. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. So in whichever questions that you had written down, it's just more or less allowing you to see whether there's some areas that's missing, or you might have had a particular focus in particular theme areas. So yeah, thanks for that activity in terms of doing that your post-it notes. So it's going back and clustering your questions, and I guess maybe it just in a way help you to kind of gather bits of your framework. In a way, does it help you to organize your thoughts, like kind of help you in questions that you might have not covered, and organize your thoughts? Your questions spread across the quadrants, or are there some gaps that you might be thinking about, or any of the relationships that each of the quadrants have, or some of your questions? It might lead to more questions in this particular area. So yeah, thanks for sharing for our 2 participants who earlier shared that their work. Okay, so that in a way, a framework, just in summary, there are many frameworks, and are some of them better than the others? I think it just depends on what the context is and what you might use from it, and where you might draw different ones from it. And you might you know, in a way, it depends on where you use them, like the quality of the data you are drawing on, you know, some of the data and information that you have. And you don't have to pick, it's what I've showed you, you don't have to, you know, it's not like choosing one, you kind of pick and mix. It's kind of like, it's trying to get a grip of the concepts within the framework and then see how it fits into like a puzzle. So you make it, in a sense, you make a sense of it in terms of your context, your budget, and of course your time frame. And in a way, you don't have to use kind of the whole thing. You can go deep into one of the particular elements. You know, or some might not be relevant to your particular work. And then you kind of going deep into one of the particular elements that you think that this is kind of really important for the change or what you wanted to address. Is there an ultimate framework? No. You know, there will always be, every framework will have detractors, and in a way, it's for you to kind of consume as a consumer of these frameworks. It's like being open to, you know, the challenges of use of that particular framework, but at the same time using it as the basis of, you know, applying it in terms of your work. I don't know, the New Zealand government, you know, in terms of its strong, its policy, its gender policy, I think that was shared at the last one, but in a way, it's not, I think it allows making sure that it doesn't specifically identify any particular framework. It's really looking at how is it that you do gender mainstreaming, or you do the gender analysis and use the framework, pick and choose from the framework. In a way, this is the extra 10% that, you know, we're talking about. So our final kind of takeaways really is used in doing gender analysis, or doing gender analysis and using the frameworks, is asking good questions, the questions that you asked from the case study, looking and seeing whether there is existing sex disaggregated data, or is the data there, or any gender relevant data. Read local context, doing that analysis of the situation, what is the, you know, history, the analysis about that particular issue in that context, and of course, talking to people. People have this knowledge, have this local NGOs, government officials, your activists, your researchers, and, you know, synthesizing what you know. And then you can, of course, bring in people who have expertise in this area for further analysis, gender expertise, or expertise in that particular sector. And I think in a way, it'll make you see sort of patterns and relationships in terms of using the frameworks. So in terms of frameworks, being curious, always asking good questions, diving in. It starts with us, who maybe, you know, people who are not gender aware, and bringing in different experts if you wish. And of course, with any of your program and project, budget and work plan, this will depend on that. How do you bring in this expertise? Making sure you're looking at all these groups, women and girls, men and women, men and boys, also marginalized groups, social groups that are socially excluded, and also, yeah, just knowing your blind spots and making those linkages. So that's the end of the presentation. So I'm happy to, yeah.
Kia ora, Gina, that was fantastic. You managed to make really complex issues simple, and it's so interesting to see how the frameworks have come from women's issues into a much more detailed political analysis and cultural analysis. And you know, we've got a training session next week on political and economic analysis, and it's just so important, isn't it, to understand the context that you're working in and the political drivers, and that balance between formal and informal approaches, and you can't have one without the other. So I think we're sort of run out of time now, and people have put questions through the chat room. I think that the key thing is, Gina, are we able to have some links to, I mean, I've got 3 sort of key frameworks here, obviously the Rowan Kelleher one, but also the Mossa, the triple roles framework, and the women's empowerment framework. I mean, they're interesting for people to just have links to further information on those. Is that okay? And we can distribute that with your slides and the case studies. But yeah, I mean, it's so important and useful for us to see how you have made it practical and real and applicable. So thank you so much for that. And we will be sending around, just everybody here, we will be sending around all those tools and slides and so on. So kia ora, Gina, thank you for coming back. It was really by popular demand to dive into those frameworks a bit further. So we really appreciate it and appreciate your time. And Bula Vinaka, I'm glad it's good weather in Fiji. It's getting wintry here. So hope to see you in the Pacific soon when the borders open.
Okay, great.
All right.